After 8 years of living under my own roof, my son-in-law and my daughter won $95 million in the lottery. That very night, my son-in-law looked me dead in the eye and said, "Get out of this house. It's mine now." I just smiled. Then I asked him a single question, a question that made his face go as pale as a ghost. I was about to make him lose everything, not because I was a cruel man, but because his greed had blinded him so much that he didn't realize he was standing at the edge of an abyss. Welcome to our story. Before we begin, leave a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments from which corner of the world you're listening. A quick note. This is a story with dramatized elements to protect identities and deliver a profound lesson. Any resemblance to reality is purely coincidental, but the message is what truly matters. After 8 years, Cameron told me I had to leave. I smiled. He didn't know anything about the second ticket. My name is Theodore Mason. I am 72 years old and spent 38 of those years working as a civil engineer for the Department of Transportation. I built bridges, not just the ones that cross rivers, although I did plenty of those, but the kind that connect people to their jobs, to their families, to their futures. Engineering teaches you to think about foundations, about what withstands pressure and what cracks, about planning for the long term. I should have applied those same principles to my own life. I live well, or rather, I used to live comfortably in a house at 2847 Pine Ridge Road up in Blowing Rock, North Carolina. If you know the Blue Ridge Mountains, you know that Blowing Rock rests at the foot of the peaks, surrounded by pine forests and air so crisp and clean it purifies your lungs in the best way possible. Pine Ridge Road runs along the southern edge of town, a quiet street where the yards are wide and the neighbors call you by your first name. It's the kind of place where, at night, you can hear the wind moving through the branches. My late wife, Marianne, and I built that house together in 1988. And I mean, we built it with our own 2 hands. I framed the structure and poured the concrete foundation with the help of a buddy who worked in construction. Marianne picked out every tile, every paint color, every hinge on the kitchen cabinets. She planted the rose bushes and the row of young oak trees along the driveway. Over the years, those oaks grew tall and straight, casting a beautiful shadow under the moonlight. Marianne used to say they were the bones of the house, the part that held up all the beauty. We were married for 41 years. She passed away in the spring of 2016. Pancreatic cancer. It happened fast, way too fast. One day she was complaining about a backache, and 6 weeks later she was gone. I still remember the exact moment the doctor told us there was nothing more they could do. Marianne squeezed my hand and said, "Well, Ted, I suppose we'll just have to make the absolute most of the time we have left." That was her way. Firm, practical, kind. After she was gone, the house felt too big, too quiet. I kept her side of the bed untouched. I left her slippers right by the nightstand. I'd walk through the kitchen expecting to smell the percolator coffee, but there was only silence. Friends told me it would get easier with time. It didn't. It just became different. That fall, in November 2016, my daughter Claire called me. She was 30 back then, married to a man named Cameron White. They'd been together since college and had been married for about 2 years. Claire had always been my little girl, the one who would sit on my lap while I drew bridge blueprints on graph paper, asking me 1,000 questions. She was smart, curious, full of life, but somewhere along the way, after marrying Cameron, she changed. She called less, visited less. When she did come over, Cameron always had some excuse to cut the visit short. That November, Claire told me Cameron had been fired from his sales job. They were struggling to pay rent down in Charlotte. She sounded exhausted, scared. So, I did what any father would do. I told them to come home, to move in with me until they got back on their feet. "Just for a few months, Dad," Claire said, "until Cameron finds something new." I believed her. They moved in right before the holidays. At first, it felt good to have people in the house again. Claire cooked dinners, and Cameron helped me replace some rotting floorboards on the back porch. We'd sit around the table after dinner, talking about whatever the weather, football, plans for Christmas. It felt like a family, but then months turned into a year. Cameron didn't find a job, or maybe he stopped looking. I couldn't say. He spent more and more time on the couch, swiping on his phone screen, making calls behind closed doors. Claire started picking up double shifts at a local clinic. She'd come home exhausted, too tired to talk. And slowly, so slowly, I didn't even notice it happening. My house stopped feeling like mine. Cameron started making little comments. "You should remodel this kitchen, Ted. These cabinets are straight out of the 80s. You know, we could turn your workshop into a real guest room if we cleared it out." At first, I thought he was just trying to help. Then I realized he was measuring, planning, taking inventory. Year 2 turned into 3, then 4, then 5. I kept thinking they'd leave once they saved up enough, once Cameron got a solid lead on a job, but it never happened. Instead, I was the one who started feeling like a guest. Cameron would rearrange the furniture without asking. He'd invite his friends over, and I would retreat to my bedroom. Claire stopped looking me in the eye. When I tried to talk to her alone, Cameron would appear in the doorway, listening. That was 8 years ago. I should have seen it sooner. I should have recognized the way Cameron slowly turned my daughter against me, the way he made himself comfortable in a house he didn't build, in a life he didn't earn. But I didn't, because I loved my daughter, because I thought somehow things would get better. Then, 3 months ago, I bought 2 lottery tickets at the highway gas station, just a couple of tickets for the Mega Millions. I gave one to Claire as a little gift, just a nice gesture. I kept the other. 3 days later, one of those tickets won $95 million, and that was when Cameron decided I had to go. But Cameron made a mistake. When I bought those tickets, I didn't just buy one. Let me tell you how it all started. How 8 years ago, I opened the door for Cameron and Claire. But first, I need to go back a bit further. Back to the spring of 2016, when I lost Marianne. I was 60 years old. We had been planning a trip to the coast of South Carolina for that summer. One of those long, slow road trips where you stop in every little beach town, eat fried shrimp, and watch the waves roll in. Marianne loved the ocean. She used to say it reminded her that the world was much bigger than any problem dragging you down. We never took that trip. The cancer moved fast. By the time the doctors caught it, there wasn't much they could do except keep her comfortable. I stayed with her every day in that hospital room, holding her hand, talking about everything and nothing. She told me stories I'd already heard 100 times about the day we bought the lot on Pine Ridge Road, about the time Claire was born 3 weeks early and I almost drove off the road rushing to the hospital. She laughed. Even then, she laughed. On her last morning, she squeezed my hand and said, "Ted, don't you dare become one of those old men who stop living. Promise me." I promised her. 3 days later, we held her wake at the community church. Claire drove up from Charlotte and stood beside me at the grave, her hand clutching mine. She cried silently, with her head resting on my shoulder. For a moment, I felt like I still had a family, like I wasn't completely alone. But then Claire went back to the city, and I went back to that empty house, and the silence was unbearable. That November of 2016, Claire called. I could hear the tension in her voice before she even said the words. "Dad, Cameron got let go. We're behind on rent. I don't know what we're going to do." I didn't hesitate. "Come home, sweetie. Stay here until you get settled." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." 2 weeks later, they arrived in a rented U-Haul with all their things. I helped Cameron carry the boxes into the guest room. Claire hugged me on the front porch and whispered, "Thanks, Dad. It's just for a little while." I believed her. The first year or two wasn't that bad. Cameron helped me with repairs around the house, fixing a leaky faucet, caulking the windows. Claire cooked on Sundays, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, just like Marianne used to make. We'd sit at the kitchen table afterward and talk about the weather, Claire's new job at the clinic, Cameron's job hunt. It felt almost normal, almost like a family. But around the third year, things started to change. It was small details at first. Cameron started moving furniture without asking. One day I came home from the hardware store and found that the old armchair, Marianne's favorite, where she sat to read every afternoon, had been shoved into the garage. When I asked him about it, Cameron shrugged. It didn't fit right. Ted, we needed space for the new TV stand. Then he started moving Marianne's things. The framed photos of her I kept on the mantel were taken down and replaced by generic artwork bought at a department store. Her gardening tools disappeared from the shed. When I asked Claire, she looked away. Cameron thought it would be healthier for you, Dad, you know, to move on. Move on. I didn't say anything. I just took one of Marianne's photos and put it back on my nightstand, where Cameron couldn't touch it. By year 4 and 5, the changes were harder to ignore. Cameron stopped asking for my opinion on anything. He invited people over, his friends, people I'd never seen, and I had to go lock myself in my room. He started talking about our house instead of your house, as if he had built it, as if he had poured the foundation with his own hands. Claire stopped sitting down to chat with me after dinner. She would disappear into their room, and I'd hear them talking in low voices behind the closed door. I tried to talk to her. I'd catch her in the kitchen in the mornings and say, "Sweetie, is everything okay?" She would smile, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Everything is fine, Dad," but it wasn't. By years 6, 7, and 8, 2021, 2022, 2023, and heading into 2024, I felt like a stranger in my own home. Cameron would walk past me in the hallway without saying a word. He made decisions about repairs, about the yard, about painting the rooms, and I wouldn't find out until the job was already done. When I confronted him, he'd sigh like I was being stubborn. "Ted, we're just trying to help. You aren't getting any younger." I started spending more time in my room. I ate dinner alone. I'd listen to the sound of their voices in the living room, their laughter, and I felt like the walls of my own house were closing in on me. My only relief was my neighbor, Bernie Sullivan. Bernie is 74. He's a retired mailman with a very dry sense of humor and as stubborn as a mule. He'd been my friend for over 30 years, ever since he and his wife Martha moved in 3 houses down. Bernie would stop by to see me every week, usually with some excuse, borrowing a tool, asking about the weather, inviting me for coffee. But I knew what he was really doing. He was checking to make sure I was okay. One Tuesday morning, in early April of this year, 2024, I walked over to Bernie's house. He was in his garage tinkering with an old lawnmower. He looked up and smiled. "Well, if it ain't Theodore Mason, haven't seen you in the sunlight in 2 weeks. Thought you'd turned into a vampire." I managed a small smile. "Just staying busy." "Busy hiding in your room, you mean?" I didn't argue with him. Bernie wiped his hands with a rag and looked at me seriously. "You know you don't have to live like this, right? I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do." We stood there for a minute, saying nothing. Then Bernie pulled 2 crumpled bills out of his pocket and held them up. "I'll make you a deal. I'm going to the gas station to buy a lottery ticket. Come with me. Buy one yourself. Maybe you'll win and finally get the hell out of that house." I burst out laughing. It was the first time I'd laughed in weeks. "Bernie, I've never bought a lottery ticket in my life." "Well, it's about time you did." So I went with him. And that Tuesday morning, the first week of April 2024, I did something I had never done before. I bought a lottery ticket not because I needed the money, but because Bernie dared me, and because, for a brief moment, I wanted to believe that something, anything, could change. Those tickets cost me a few bucks. The day I bought them was Wednesday, the 3rd of April 2024. I had gone to Bernie and Martha Sullivan's house that afternoon, just like I did almost every week. Bernie and I had an ongoing game of chess, and Martha always made a pot of coffee and sat with us at the table reading her book, occasionally making sarcastic comments about Bernie's awful strategy. "Are you getting predictable in your old age, Ted?" Bernie said, moving his knight. I've seen that same opening 3 times this month, and you still haven't beaten me, I replied. Martha looked up from her book and smiled. She's 71, sharp as a tack, with silver hair, reading glasses, and a laugh that fills any room. You two have been playing the exact same game for 30 years, she said. Honestly, I don't know how neither of you falls asleep. We played in comfortable silence for a while. Then Bernie leaned back in his chair and said, "Did you see the jackpot is up to $95 million? I didn't take my eyes off the board. I don't play the lottery, Bernie. I know, but maybe you should. A little excitement in your life wouldn't hurt." I moved my bishop. Checkmate in 3 moves. Bernie grunted. "Damn it, Ted." Martha closed her book. "Bernie, leave the man alone. If he doesn't want to throw his money in the trash." "It's a couple of bucks," Bernie interrupted. "A few bucks for a little bit of hope. Come on, Ted. Live a little. I'm heading to the convenience store after this. Come with me. I dare you." I looked at him. He had that stubborn glint in his eye, the one that meant he wasn't going to drop it, and honestly, after 8 years of feeling invisible in my own house, maybe I did need a little excitement, even if it was just a stupid lottery ticket. "Fine," I said. "I'll buy one." Bernie grinned from ear to ear. That's the spirit. An hour later, we pulled into the highway gas station in Bernie's old truck. The place is a small, run-down joint, with peeling paint and a buzzing neon sign that says, "Open 24 hours." Dave, the owner, was behind the counter. Dave is 55, balding, sports a thick mustache, and wears a flannel shirt that he seems to wear year-round. He looked up when we walked in and raised an eyebrow. Bernie Sullivan and Ted Mason together in the middle of the afternoon. "This can't be good." "We're here to make you rich, Dave," Bernie said, slapping some bills on the counter. "1 ticket for the Mega Millions." Dave rang it up and handed him the ticket. Then Bernie turned to me. "Your turn." I hesitated. It felt ridiculous standing there in a gas station at 72 years old, buying a lottery ticket for the first time in my life. But I pulled out my wallet and placed my debit card on the counter. "Actually, Dave, give me 2 tickets." Dave blinked. "Two?" "2." He printed them, swiped my card, and handed me the tickets along with the receipt. I carefully folded the receipt and put it in my wallet. Then I looked at the 2 pieces of paper in my hand. They were identical, just strings of meaningless numbers. I put them in my pocket and followed Bernie back to the truck. 2 tickets, Bernie said, starting the engine. "Look at you, Ted, a regular gambler. Don't push it." That evening I went back home. It was quiet, as usual. Cameron was in the living room watching something on his laptop. Claire was in the kitchen making dinner. It was rare for her to cook anymore. Most nights she worked late or ate locked in her room, but tonight she was standing at the stove stirring something in a pot, and for a moment it reminded me of the old days when Marianne would stand in that exact same spot, humming a song. "Hey, Dad," Claire said without looking up. "Dinner's almost ready." I pulled the 2 tickets out of my pocket and looked at them. On an impulse, I walked over to Claire and held one out. "Hey, I bought a couple of lottery tickets today." "Silly. I know, but here, this one's for you." Claire turned around, surprised, wiped her hands on a towel, and took the ticket. For the first time in months, she smiled. A real smile, small but genuine. "Thanks, Dad. Who knows? Maybe we'll get lucky." "Maybe," I said. Cameron appeared in the doorway with his arms crossed. He looked at the ticket in Claire's hand and snorted. "You bought lottery tickets? Seriously, Ted? What are you trying to do? Win your dignity back?" He walked over, snatched the ticket from Claire's fingers, and held it up to the light as if examining a counterfeit bill. "Jackpot. $95 million. Yeah, good luck with that." Claire didn't say anything. She just turned back to the stove. I went to my room, took the other ticket out of my pocket, and put it in the top drawer of my nightstand next to Marianne's reading glasses. And then I forgot about it. 3 days later, on Saturday, April 6, I was out in my workshop sanding a piece of cedar wood I was shaping into a small box. I liked working with my hands. It kept me sane, I was focused on the wood grain when I heard a scream from inside the house. Not a scream of terror, a scream of shock, of joy. I dropped the sandpaper and walked quickly toward the back door. When I walked in, Claire was standing in the middle of the kitchen, shaking, her phone in one hand and the lottery ticket in the other. "We won," she whispered. "We won 95 million. Cameron appeared behind her, moving fast. He snatched the ticket from her hand and ran to the laptop on the kitchen island, pulling up the results page. His eyes scanned the numbers. Once, twice. Holy. He exhaled. "We actually won." I stood in the doorway watching them. Claire's hands were shaking. Cameron already had his cell phone to his ear, dialing a number, pacing back and forth. "Yes, I need to speak to someone about claiming a prize. A big one, 95 million. Neither of them looked at me. I stood there for a long time, feeling something strange settle in my chest. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't joy. Just a dull, empty ache. Because in that moment, I realized something I should have seen years ago. I no longer existed to them. I was just a ghost in my own house. I stayed in the workshop until dark that evening. When I finally went back inside, Cameron was waiting for me at the kitchen table. His posture had changed. It was no longer the polite tolerance he had faked for 8 years, but something harder. He sat with his arms crossed. Claire was standing by the sink, her back to me. "What's going on?" I asked. Cameron didn't stand up. "We need to talk. Our situation has changed." I stayed near the door. "What do you mean?" "Claire and I just won $95 million, and this house no longer fits our lifestyle." The words hung in the air. Their lifestyle? That's right. Cameron leaned back, opening his hands. "We think you'd be more comfortable in a senior living facility, an assisted living home, a place with staff, medical care. We'll cover all the expenses. All you have to do is sign over the deed to the property." "Sign over the deed?" I looked at Claire. "Sweetie, what is this?" She didn't turn around. She didn't say a single word. Cameron stood up and walked toward the counter. "Let me be clear, Ted. We don't need your charity anymore. We don't need Times You Times anymore. This house is a relic. Old plumbing, old wiring. We could sell it, demolish it, whatever. It's ours now. It's mine," I whispered. Cameron smiled. Not kindly. "Actually, you might want to rethink that, because if you make this difficult, we'll take legal action. Conservatorship, guardianship proceedings. You're 72 years old, Ted. You live alone. You can barely take care of yourself. A good lawyer could build a very solid case that you are no longer capable of managing your own affairs." My hands were shaking. "That's a lie." "Is it? At your age? How many good years do you really have left? 5? 10? Do you want to spend them fighting us? Because we will fight, and we will win." I looked at Claire again. "Please, look at me." She turned around, and for a second, I saw something in her. Guilt, maybe pain. But then Cameron put his hand on her shoulder, and she looked away. "We're offering you a good deal," Cameron said. "A clean break. We'll set you up nicely. Cover your costs. You just have to cooperate. And if I don't, then we do this the hard way. I've already started documenting things. The way you forget to pay bills, the times you've seemed confused, your isolation, your depression. A judge will think, this man needs help, and we'll be right there to give it to him." I felt a pressure in my chest. I couldn't breathe. Cameron adjusted his shirt. "Think about it tonight. We'll talk tomorrow. Let's go, Claire." He walked toward the hallway. Claire followed him, her head down, her hands clasped. She didn't look at me, and then they disappeared, and I was left alone in my own kitchen, the kitchen Marianne and I had built, and I felt like a ghost. I couldn't stay in there. I walked out the back door to my workshop, the smell of sawdust and varnish, the tools hanging on the wall, the half-finished cedar box on my workbench. I turned on the light and stood there, feeling the weight of Cameron's words crushing me. "We don't need you anymore. You are no longer capable. How many good years do you have left?" I sat on the old stool and put my head in my hands. I felt small, powerless, scared. I stayed there until it was late into the night. Then I went back inside. I walked past the kitchen, where Cameron and Claire's voices filtered out from behind their closed bedroom door, and I went into mine. I sat on the edge of the bed, not my side, but Marianne's. It was an old habit. Whenever I needed to think, to sort through something difficult, I sat on her side, as if somehow she was still there. I looked at the framed photo on the dresser, Marianne and me on our wedding day, young, full of hope. I felt so far away from that man now. Cameron was right. I was 72. I was alone. I had nothing to fight back with. Then my eyes drifted to the nightstand drawer. I hesitated, then pulled it open. Inside was a small envelope where I kept important things. Marianne's reading glasses, old letters, some cash, and underneath all of that, folded in half, was a piece of paper, the lottery ticket. My hands shook as I pulled it out. The numbers were printed clearly. I grabbed my phone and searched for the Mega Millions results. The winning numbers popped up. I compared them to the ticket. They matched, every single one of them. I sat there, my heart beating 1,000 miles a minute. Then I pulled my wallet out of my jacket. The receipt was still inside. The proof that I had bought both tickets in a single transaction. I bought them. Both of them. Cameron didn't know. He thought the only winning ticket was the one he'd snatched from Claire. But he was wrong. I sat back down on Marianne's side of the bed, staring at the ticket. For the first time in 8 years, I felt something other than resignation. I felt anger, and beneath that, something stronger. Hope. I thought about Marianne, about how she would put her hand on my shoulder when I was overthinking a problem and say, "Ted, sometimes you just have to trust the foundation. If it's solid, it'll hold." This was my foundation, this house, this life, the work I had done. I wasn't going to let Cameron tear it away from me. That night, I slept with the ticket under my pillow. And when Sunday morning, April 7, arrived, I picked up the phone and called Bernie. "Bernie," I said when he answered, "I need your help." "Ted?" His voice was thick with sleep. "What's wrong?" "I need your help," I said, my voice trembling. "Cameron is trying to take my house. He's threatening me with conservatorship. But Bernie, I found something. The other lottery ticket. I bought 2. I still have one." There was a silence. Then Bernie said, "I'm heading over right now." "No, don't come here. Cameron and Claire are here. Then get over to my house. You've got 5 minutes." And he hung up. I grabbed the ticket, the receipt, my wallet, and my keys. I slipped out the back door and walked the 3 houses down to Bernie's. He was already standing on his porch in his bathrobe, waiting. "You look terrible," he said when I walked up. "I feel terrible." He put a hand on my shoulder and guided me inside. Martha was already in the kitchen making coffee. She turned around when she saw me, her face softening with worry. "Oh, Ted, honey, what happened?" I sat at their kitchen table, the same table where Bernie and I had played chess just 4 days ago, and I told them everything. The jackpot, Cameron's threats, the assisted living facility, the conservatorship, the discovery of the second ticket. By the time I finished, Martha's face was red with anger. "That bastard," she said, "that absolute bastard." And Claire just stood there? She didn't say anything? Bernie leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You need a lawyer, a damn good one." "I don't know any lawyers." "I do," Martha said. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts. "Rachel Vance is the daughter of Bernie's niece. Remember her? She came to our barbecue a few years back. She's sharp as a tack. She's a property and family law attorney down in Charlotte." Bernie nodded. "Rachel is tough. If anyone can handle this, it's her." Martha dialed. It rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice answered. "Aunt Martha, it's awfully early. Everything okay?" "Rachel, honey, I'm sorry to call you on a Sunday, but we have an emergency. It's our neighbor, Ted Mason. He needs help. Can you see him today?" There was a pause. Then Rachel said, "Tell me what's going on." Martha handed me the phone. I explained everything again, fast, clear, as if I were presenting a bridge blueprint to the DOT board. When I finished, Rachel was quiet for a moment. "Mr. Mason, you have the receipt proving you bought both tickets in a single transaction?" "Yes." "And the second ticket is still in your possession?" "Yes." "Then you have a case. Can you be in Charlotte by 11? I'll meet you at my office." "I'll be there." She gave me the address and hung up. I handed the phone back to Martha. "She's going to see you," Martha said, squeezing my hand. "You're going to be okay." Bernie stood up. "I'm going with you." "No," I told him. "I appreciate it, but I need to do this on my own." Bernie studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but you call me the second you're done." "Understood. I will." I left their house and walked back to mine. Cameron's car was still in the driveway, windows tinted dark. I got into my truck, started the engine, and headed toward Charlotte. The drive took about 2 hours, down the highway, descending from the mountains, taking the curves through the pine forests. I'd driven this route 100 times when I worked for the DOT. I knew every curve, every grade, every stretch where black ice formed in the winter. I thought about Marianne, about the day we drove this exact road to pick out the kitchen tiles. She had fallen asleep in the passenger seat, her head resting against the window, and I had driven in silence, just watching her breathe. I thought about Claire, the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I drew bridges. The way she laughed when I let her help me measure, holding the end of the tape measure like it was the most important job in the world. I thought about Cameron, the way he had looked at me last night, cold and calculating, like I was a problem to be solved. And I thought about what I had spent my entire career doing, building things that could withstand pressure, bridges, roads, foundations. Everything I'd built in my life had one thing in common: a solid base. If the foundation was strong, the structure stood tall. This house was my foundation, this life, and I wasn't going to let it crumble. I arrived in Charlotte just before 11. Rachel's office was downtown, in a brick building. I parked on the street and took the elevator up to the 3rd floor. Rachel was waiting in the reception area. She was 42, tall with a piercing gaze, her dark hair pulled back into a ponytail. She gave me a firm handshake. "Mr. Mason, right this way." Her office was small but professional. Law books lining the shelves, framed degrees on the wall. She pointed to a chair and sat across from me with a yellow legal pad. "Tell me everything," she said. And I did. I told her about the tickets, the receipt, Cameron's threats, the conservatorship, the nursing home. I showed her the ticket and the receipt. She examined both carefully, took photos, made notes. When I finished, she leaned back and looked at me. "Here is the situation. By law, the person who purchases the ticket is the owner of the ticket, unless there is a signed agreement transferring ownership. You bought both tickets in a single transaction. You have the receipt. You handed one ticket to your daughter as a gift. There was no contract, no sale, no formal transfer of property. The ticket your son-in-law is trying to claim legally belongs to you." Relief washed over me completely. "So, I have a case? You have a very solid case. But we need to move fast. We are going to file a dispute notice with the State Lottery Commission today. Right now? Today? If we wait, Cameron might try to cash the ticket and make this much messier. We have to get ahead of him." She pulled out her laptop and started typing. For the next 2 hours, we worked together, drafting the notice, signing affidavits, compiling the evidence. At 2:47 that afternoon, Rachel hit send on the electronic filing. "Done," she said. "The commission has been notified. Cameron cannot claim that prize without a hearing." I stared at her. "Just like that? Just like that." She closed her laptop and looked at me. "On a serious note, Mr. Mason, when they find out about this, they are going to be furious. Are you safe at your house? I'll be careful. If anything happens, anything at all, no matter how small, you call the police. And you call me. Understood?" Understood. I shook her hand and left. The drive back felt different. The mountains were the same, the highway was the same, but I wasn't. I no longer felt defeated. I felt armed. I pulled into Blowing Rock, just past 7. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I turned onto Pine Ridge Road and saw the lights on in my house. Cameron's car was in the driveway. I parked and walked up to the front door. Before I could even open it, Cameron appeared in the hallway, phone in hand, face red. "What the hell did you do?" he spat. I had seen Cameron angry before, but this was different. This wasn't the cold, calculating rage from the night before. This was the fury of a man who had already started spending money that wasn't his. Cameron's voice filled the house before I could even close the door. "Our lawyer got the notice. You want to explain this to me?" He stood in the hallway, blocking my path, cell phone still in his hand. His face was blood red, his jaw clenched. I could see the vein pulsing in his temple. I set my keys on the entryway table and looked him in the eye. "I don't owe you any explanation. You filed a legal dispute," Cameron yelled, raising his voice. "Are you trying to steal our money?" "I'm not stealing anything," I said calmly. "I bought both tickets. I have the receipt." "You gave one to Claire. You can't take back a gift." "I gave Claire a ticket. Not the winning ticket. That ticket is mine." Cameron took a step forward. "You think a judge is going to swallow that? You think anyone is going to believe you just times to keep the winning ticket for yourself?" I walked right past him into the living room. My legs felt steady. My hands weren't shaking. I sat down in Marianne's old armchair, the one Cameron had shoved into the garage years ago, the one I had quietly moved back into the house last month. I sat in it now, reclaiming my space. Cameron followed me, looming over me with his arms crossed. The power stance of a man used to getting his way. "Here's what's going to happen, Ted," he said. "You're going to drop that lawsuit today, because if you don't, we are going to make your life a living hell." I looked up at him. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. We have resources now, real money. We can drag this out for years. Lawyers, depositions, appeals. How old are you, Ted?" "Tishara, at your age, do you really think you're going to live long enough to see the end of this?" I didn't answer him. Cameron leaned down, placing his hands on the armrests of my chair, his face inches from mine. "I've been documenting things, Ted, concerning behaviors, memory lapses. That time you left the stove on, the bills you forgot to pay, the way you wander around the house talking to yourself." My chest tightened. "I have never left the stove on," Cameron smiled. "Are you sure?" "Because I have notes that say otherwise. Dates, times, witnesses." "That is a lie." "Is it? Or is it just the failing memory of an old man who can't take care of himself anymore?" Cameron straightened up, shoving his hands into his pockets. "We can prove you aren't competent, Ted. We can prove you need a guardian, and when we do, every decision you make, including this lawsuit, disappears." I heard a noise at the door. Claire was standing there, hugging herself, her face pale. Cameron said in a low voice, "Stay out of this." He snapped at her without even looking her way. Claire flinched, but she didn't leave. She just stood there, watching, her eyes darting from Cameron to me. I stood up slowly. My knees ached, but I didn't let it show. I looked Cameron dead in the eye. "This conversation is over," I said. Cameron's smile widened. "You're going to lose everything, Ted. The money, your daughter, your dignity, everything." I walked toward the door. As I passed Claire, I stopped. She looked at me, and for a split second, I saw the little girl, the one who had held my hand at Marianne's funeral. Then I kept walking. "You can't win this!" Cameron yelled at my back. I stopped in the archway of the hall and turned around. "My dignity is mine!" "Cameron, that's something you can't take from me." I went to my room and closed the door. For a long time, I sat on the edge of the bed listening. I could hear Cameron and Claire talking in hushed tones. Then the voices got louder. Claire was saying something. I couldn't make out the words, and Cameron cut her off with a sharp tone. Then I heard Claire crying. Cameron's voice echoed. He did this, not us. He's the one destroying this family. I closed my eyes. At 9 o'clock on the dot, my cell phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Are you okay? I typed back. Yes. He threatened me. Conservatorship, guardianship. Her reply came immediately. Document everything. Write it down. Dates, times, exact words. I pulled an old notebook out of my desk drawer, one I used years ago for project notes, and started writing. Asterisk. Sunday, the 7th of April 2024, 7:15 p.m. Cameron confronted me in the living room, said he has been documenting concerning behaviors, claimed I left the stove on. False. Claimed I forgot to pay bills. False. Threatened to prove I am not competent. Threatened guardianship proceedings. Said they could drag the lawsuit out for years. Claire was present but said nothing. I wrote for 20 minutes, recording everything I could remember. Cameron's exact words, his body language, the lies he had told, the threats he had made. When I finished, I stared at the page, and slowly, a realization washed over me. Cameron hadn't started documenting things times after times winning the lottery. He had been planning this for a long time, maybe months, maybe years. The notes he mentioned, the witnesses, those weren't real. But the fact that he even thought to threaten me with it meant he had been preparing. He had been waiting for an opportunity to take control. The lottery win had only accelerated his plans. I left the notebook on the nightstand and lay down, but I didn't sleep well. Every sound in the house put me on edge. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a threat. When morning broke on Monday, April 8, I got up at dawn and made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook in front of me and waited. At 9, my phone rang. The voice on the other end would change everything. The woman introduced herself as Linda from First National Bank. Mr. Mason, I'm the assistant manager at the branch. I'm calling regarding a power of attorney filing we received yesterday afternoon in your name, listing Cameron White as your legal representative. I froze in the kitchen. The phone pressed hard against my ear, feeling the floor tilt beneath my feet. I never filed for a power of attorney. There was a pause. We suspected as much. The signature didn't match the one we have on file. We rejected the request and flagged the account. Mr. Mason, someone attempted to forge your signature. I gripped the phone tightly. Who submitted it? The name on the log was Cameron White. If that document had been accepted, it would have given him total legal authority over all my accounts, checking, savings, everything. He could have transferred funds, closed accounts, taken out loans in my name. I slumped into a chair. My chest felt tight. I couldn't breathe. Cameron hadn't just threatened me. He had tried to steal everything from me, every penny I had. My pension, the money Marianne and I had saved for 40 years. If the bank hadn't caught the fake signature, if they had processed the paperwork, Cameron would have left me on the street before I even knew what hit me. Mr. Mason, are you still there? Yes, I managed to say. I'm here. I am emailing you a copy of the document right now, Linda said. You'll want to show this to your attorney. And Mr. Mason, you should file a report with the police department. This is criminal fraud. I will. Thank you. I hung up and sat at the table, staring at my phone. My hands were shaking. Cameron had done this yesterday, Monday, the day after I filed the dispute. Less than 24 hours after our confrontation in the living room, he had gone to the bank and tried to forge a power of attorney. Was it retaliation? Or had he been planning this all along? The fear that had been nesting in my chest for days began to shift. It slowly hardened into something else. Rage. At 9:15, I called Rachel. He tried to forge a power of attorney, I said, my voice shaking. The bank caught it. They rejected it, but he tried. Rachel was silent for a moment. Then she said, "That is a criminal offense. Fraud and forgery. This changes everything, Mr. Mason. What do I do?" "Call the bank back. Get that document. Email it to me immediately. Then go to the police precinct and file a report today. Do not wait. Okay, this is good, Mr. Mason. I know it feels terrible, but this is evidence. Hard evidence that Cameron is willing to commit crimes to get what he wants. We can use this. I called the bank back. Linda confirmed she'd sent the email. At 10:30, it arrived. I opened it on my laptop, my heart racing. The document was a standard power of attorney form. My name was typed at the top. Cameron White's name was listed as the agent, and at the bottom, in careful, practiced handwriting, was a signature that looked almost like mine. Almost. But it wasn't. The slant was wrong. The loop on the M was too wide. Cameron had tried. He had practiced, you could tell, but he hadn't quite nailed it. I stared at the signature for a long time. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, calculated. Cameron had sat down somewhere, maybe in my own house, maybe at a coffee shop downtown, and practiced signing my name until he thought he had it right. Then he had taken this form to the bank and lied. I forwarded the email to Rachel. Her reply came in minutes. This is goal. See you at mediation. That afternoon, I drove to the Blowing Rock police station. The building was small, brick, with a flag out front. I walked in and told the desk sergeant I needed to file a report for attempted fraud. They assigned me to an officer named Miller. He was in his 50s, grey-haired, with a calm, patient demeanor. He listened while I explained everything: the lottery tickets, the dispute, the confrontation, and now the forged power of attorney. I showed him the email from the bank. Officer Miller took notes, asked questions, examined the document. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me seriously. Mr. Mason, this is a felony, forgery, attempted fraud. If we can prove that Mr. White submitted this document knowing it was false, he could face criminal charges. I want that on the record, I said. Miller nodded. We'll open an investigation file. I'll reach out to the bank. I'll take your statement. I'll pull security footage if they have it. This will take time, but we will follow up. He handed me a copy of the police report with a case number printed at the top. Case 2024, BR04751. Hold on to this, he said. And Mr. Mason, be careful. If this man is willing to forge legal documents, there's no telling what else he's capable of. I folded the paper and put it in my wallet, right next to the lottery receipt. Thank you, I said. I drove home slowly, feeling the weight of the case number in my pocket. When I turned onto Pine Ridge Road, the house looked the same as always. The oaks Marianne had planted swayed in the wind. The porch light was on. Cameron's car was in the driveway. But something had changed. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was armed. I had filed the report. What I hadn't told the officer was this: Cameron White needed to be careful with times now, because I had proof that he was willing to commit a crime. Cameron came home that evening with flowers, cheap grocery store flowers wrapped in cellophane. It was 6:30. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee when I heard his car pull into the driveway. The front door opened. Cameron appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding the bouquet like a peace offering. "Ted," he said. His voice was soft, conciliatory. I think we got off on the wrong foot. I didn't say anything, just looked at him. Cameron set the flowers on the counter and pulled out a chair. "May I?" I nodded. He sat across from me, his hands clasped on the table. "I want to apologize. I was overwhelmed. The lottery win, the pressure, the legal stuff, it all got to me. I didn't mean the things I said." I took a sip of my coffee. "Which things?" "About the house, about the conservatorship." I was angry. I wasn't thinking straight. He leaned forward, looking sincere. "Ted, your family, Claire and I don't want to fight with you. We want to fix this." I lowered my mug slowly. "Fix what?" "Everything." Cameron opened his hands. "Look, I know we've had our differences, but we can work this out. You stay here. This is still your house. We'll set up an account with $10,000 a month, just for you. All you have to do is drop the legal dispute. I didn't react. I just kept watching him. I cleared my throat. In exchange for what? I asked. In exchange for acknowledging that the lottery ticket was a gift, Cameron said softly. You gave it to Claire. We won. And in return, we take care of you. 10 grand a month, Ted. That's $120,000 a year. Tax-free. It's more than your pension. You could travel, fix up the house, do whatever you want. He smiled. It looked almost genuine. We could be a family again, Cameron continued. Sunday dinners, board game nights, just the way Marianne liked it. I clenched my jaw. Don't, I said quietly. Don't you dare talk about my wife. Cameron blinked, looking surprised. I'm just saying. You threatened me, I said with a firm voice. You tried to forge a power of attorney to steal my money. And now you think some grocery store flowers and a monthly bribe are going to fix that. Cameron's smile faltered for just a second. I saw something flash in his eyes, something cold and calculating. Then he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Do you really want to fight us on this? He said. His voice had changed. The warmth was gone. I'm not fighting anyone, I answered. I'm defending what's mine. What's time's yours? Cameron let out a short, bitter laugh. You're 72 years old, Ted. You live in the past. You cling to this house because it reminds you of a woman who isn't here anymore. Marianne is gone. She's been gone for 8 years. And you're still sitting here, pretending she's going to walk through that door. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Get out, I told him. Cameron stood up too. He was taller than me, and he knew it. He looked down at me with something close to disgust. You could have had an easy life, he said. 10 grand a month. No worries, no stress. But you'd rather die broke and alone, clinging to your pride. I'd rather die with my dignity intact. Cameron stared at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head. You're going to lose everything, he said. The money, your daughter, this house, everything. And when it happens, don't say I didn't try to help you. He walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back. You know what your problem is, Ted. You think being stubborn makes you strong, but it doesn't. It just makes you pathetic. He left. The door slammed shut behind him. I stood in the kitchen listening to his footsteps fade down the hall. Then I grabbed the flowers, those cheap flowers wrapped in cellophane, and threw them in the trash. I sat back down at the table. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from rage. Cameron had tried threats. That hadn't worked. So he had tried manipulation, bribery, emotional blackmail, and when that didn't work either, he had shown his true colors again. The cold, cruel man who believed money could buy everything, who believed I was weak enough to be bought. But he was wrong. I thought about what he had said about Marianne, about me clinging to the past. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was clinging. Maybe this house, these memories, this life, maybe it was all just a way of holding on to something that was already gone, but it was times mine. My past, my memories, my home, and I'll be damned if I let Cameron White take it from me. I went to bed that night and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. I knew Cameron would try something else. Men like him always do. When threats didn't work, when manipulation didn't work, they looked for a new angle, a new weapon. But for the first time since Marianne passed away, I remembered who I was. Theodore Mason. Engineer, builder, survivor. I had built bridges that withstood pressure. I had built a house that had weathered 36 years of storms. I had built a life with Marianne that Cameron could never understand and could never take from me, and I wasn't going to let him break me now. The following Tuesday, there was a knock at my door. A firm, official knock. The kind that makes your stomach turn before you even turn the knob. I opened it and found a woman standing on my porch, holding a clipboard and wearing a badge from Adult Protective Services, clipped to her jacket. She was in her 40s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, with tired eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Theodore Mason?" she asked. "Yes. My name is Laura Henderson. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services. We received a report concerning your welfare. I need to conduct an assessment to determine if you are safe and capable of caring for yourself." My stomach dropped. "Cameron. Who filed the report?" I asked. "I'm not permitted to disclose that information," Laura said. "May I come in?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to shut the door in her face and call Rachel, but I knew that would only make things worse. Refusing would look suspicious, like I had something to hide. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. Laura walked into the living room and sat on the sofa. She placed her clipboard on the coffee table and clicked her pen. "Mr. Mason, I'm going to ask you some questions. Please, answer to the best of your ability. There are no right or wrong answers. I just need to understand your current situation." I sat in Marianne's armchair. My hands were steady, but my heart was pounding. "What is today's date?" Laura asked. "Tuesday, the 16th of April, 2024. "And who is the current president of the United States?" I answered her. She asked more questions. Where did I live? How long had I lived there? What did I do for a living? Did I have any medical conditions? Was I taking any medications? I answered everything clearly, precisely, the same way I used to present project reports to the DOT. "Mr. Mason, the report we received mentioned memory loss and confusion. Have you experienced anything like that?" "No," I said firmly. "Never." "Do you manage your own finances?" "Yes, I pay my bills on time. I balance my checkbook every month. I've been doing it for 40 years. Do you prepare your own meals?" "Yes." "And you live here with your daughter and her husband?" "They live here," I corrected her. "This is my house. I invited them to stay 8 years ago when they were going through financial difficulties." Laura took notes. I couldn't read her expression. "Mr. Mason, would you mind if I took a look around the house, just to get a sense of your environment?" "Go ahead." We walked through the house together. Laura checked the kitchen first. The counters were clean. The fridge was stocked with fresh food, milk, eggs, vegetables, leftovers in labeled containers. The stove was spotless. Not a single burner left on. Not a single sign of neglect. We moved to the bathroom. Clean, organized, towels folded, the medicine cabinet tidy with my blood pressure medication perfectly lined up, every bottle labeled with the date. Then my bedroom. The bed made, clothes put away, Marianne's photo on the nightstand, the lottery ticket still hidden in the bottom drawer. Finally, we went out to the backyard to my workshop. Laura stepped inside and paused. The tools were hanging on their pegboards, each in its proper place. The workbench was clean, the sawdust swept. On a shelf sat a row of small wooden objects I had made over the years: birdhouses, small boxes, a carved bowl. Laura picked up one of the birdhouses and examined it. "This is beautiful work. You still do carpentry?" "It keeps my hands busy," I told her. She set it down carefully. "Mr. Mason, I've been doing this job for 12 years. I can tell the difference between someone who needs help and someone who is being targeted. You are not the person described in that report." Relief flooded through me. "So you're going to close the case?" "I still need to interview your neighbors and your family members," Laura said. "But based on what I've seen today, there is absolutely no indication that you are incapable of caring for yourself. Your house is clean, your mind is sharp, your physical health appears good." She stopped at the door and handed me her business card. "If you ever need help, real help, you call me." "Thank you." Laura left. I closed the door and leaned against it. My hands finally started to shake. I had held it together during the interview. I had answered every question, passed every test. But now, alone in the quiet of my own home, the humiliation hit me. I had been forced to prove my sanity in my own house. I had been forced to show a stranger that I could take care of myself, that I wasn't confused or dangerous, or incapable. At 72 years old, I had been treated like a child who couldn't be trusted. And Cameron had done this. He had filed the report. I knew it. He had called APS and told them I was incompetent, unsafe, a danger to myself. He had weaponized the system against me, hoping they would declare me incapacitated and appoint him as my guardian. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were still shaking. Laura had said she would interview Cameron next, and I knew exactly what he would tell her. He would be calm, concerned, sincere. He would tell her about my memory lapses, my confusion, the time I supposedly left the stove on. He would paint a picture of a frail old man who could no longer fend for himself, and he would sound so believable. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, I felt a different kind of fear, not the fear of losing money or losing the house, but the fear of losing my independence, my autonomy, the right to live my own life in my own house on my own terms. That was what Cameron was really trying to take from me, not just my money, my freedom. Laura interviewed Bernie and Martha the next morning. Bernie called me the second she left. That son of a bitch tried to get you declared incompetent. His voice was loud, furious. Laura just left. She asked us 100 questions about you, your memory, your habits, if we had ever seen you confused or in danger. What did you tell her? I told her you're smarter than half the engineers still working out there. Martha told her Cameron White ought to be ashamed of himself. We told her the truth, Ted, that you are perfectly fine, and this whole thing is utter garbage. I closed my eyes. Thank you. She asked us if we'd be willing to testify if it came to that. I said, absolutely. Bernie paused. You aren't alone in this, Ted, you hear me? I hear you. That afternoon, there was another knock at my door. This time, it was Mrs. Josephine. Joe is 67, recently retired from the church council, with silver hair and a calm, steady presence that had comforted our community for 30 years. She was also very close friends with Bernie and Martha. Theodore, she said, giving me a hug. Martha called me. I wanted you to know that you have the support of the church, of the community. She walked in and sat at the kitchen table. From her bag, she pulled out a thick folder. I've known you for 16 years, Joe said. Ever since Marianne and I served on the council together. You were a devoted husband, a loving father, a good neighbor. And when Marianne passed, you carried that grief with dignity. She opened the folder and spread 10 handwritten letters across the table. These are from members of the community, people who know you, people who are willing to testify on your behalf if necessary. I stared at the letters. A lump formed in my throat. I picked one up. It was from a couple I barely knew, Tom and Susan, who lived 2 streets over. They wrote that they saw me at the hardware store every Saturday for years, always polite, always coherent, always helpful. That whenever anyone needed advice on a home project, I offered to help however I could. My eyes filled with tears. Why would they do this? Joe leaned across the table and squeezed my hand. Because Marianne was loved, and you are too. The next morning, Thursday, April 18, Laura called. Mr. Mason, I am closing your case. My conclusion is that the report was unfounded. There is no evidence of cognitive decline or self-neglect. You are fully competent to manage your own affairs. Relief rushed through my body. Thank you. I interviewed your son-in-law yesterday, Laura continued. He made several allegations regarding your memory and confusion. None of them were corroborated. In fact, everyone I spoke to said the exact opposite. What happens now? I am noting in my report that this appears to be a malicious claim related to a financial dispute. If Mr. White files another report without legitimate cause, there will be legal consequences. I sat with the phone to my ear. I felt relief, and I felt anger. Cameron had tried to strip me of my freedom, my autonomy, and he had failed. Thank you, Laura. Take care, Mr. Mason. That evening, Bernie and Martha invited me over for dinner. But when I arrived, I found it wasn't just the 3 of us. Mrs. Josephine was there. So were James and Carol, neighbors from down the street I'd known for years. "We thought you could use a little company," Martha said, ushering me in. The table was set with Martha's best china. She had made beef stew, homemade biscuits, roasted vegetables, the kind of meal Marianne used to make on Sundays. We sat around the table, and for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't felt since Marianne died. I felt seen. Bernie raised his glass. To Theodore Mason, a man who isn't going to let some punk steal his house. Everyone laughed. We clinked glasses. We ate. We talked about everything and nothing. The weather. Football. Joe's new grandson. James's retirement plans. No one brought up the lottery, or Cameron, or the APS investigation. They just let me be a person, a friend, a neighbor. At one point, I looked around the table and felt my chest tighten with emotion. When Marianne passed, I said quietly, I felt very alone. When Claire and Cameron moved in, I thought that would change. But I was still alone, because they didn't see me. They looked right through me. I paused, swallowing hard. But all of you, you see me. You really see me. Martha wiped away a tear. Bernie cleared his throat and said gruffly, all right, eat your stew." I stayed late, helping Martha wash the dishes while Bernie and James debated baseball. When I finally walked back home, the stars were shining clear and sharp in the cold mountain sky. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, Friday, April 19, I woke up to an email from Rachel. Mediation has been scheduled. Thursday, May 2, 10 a.m., State Lottery Headquarters, Charlotte. Be ready. This is it. I read the email 3 times. Then I got up, poured myself coffee, and looked out the window at the oak trees Marianne had planted 36 years ago. This was the moment everything would be decided. I wasn't afraid. The week leading up to the mediation felt like the week before a trial. Rachel called me every day. On Monday, April 22, she explained the process. It's not a courtroom, but it is formal. There will be a mediator, a neutral professional. Cameron's lawyer will present their case first. Then I will present ours. You will be asked questions. Answer honestly, clearly, and briefly. Do not ramble. Do not let your emotions take over. Attorney Montgomery, Cameron's lawyer, is going to try to make you look bad like a bitter, greedy old man. Do not let him rattle you. I'll try. You will do great, Mr. Mason. Just tell the truth. On Tuesday, we practiced. Rachel peppered me with mock questions over the phone. Why did you give the ticket to Claire? Because she's my daughter. It was a small gesture. I didn't expect to win. It was only a couple of bucks. Did you tell her it was a gift? I said, here, this one's for you. Were you expecting her to give it back if it won? I paused. No, I didn't think about it at all. It was just spontaneous. Good. That is the truth. Stick to that. On Wednesday, we reviewed the documents. Rachel went over everything. We had the receipt from the gas station showing I bought both tickets in one transaction, my bank statement confirming the debit card charge, the forged power of attorney with Cameron's name on it, the police report, and the APS social worker's conclusion that the abuse report was malicious. Attorney Montgomery knows about all of this, Rachel said. The forgery, the APS report. I'd bet anything he is no longer comfortable representing Cameron, but he's stuck. He filed the claim. He has to see it through. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the dark ceiling, my mind racing. Claire was my daughter. If I won this mediation, she would lose $95 million. She would walk away with nothing, and she would hate me for it, maybe forever. Was it worth it? I got up and walked through the dark house, through the living room, where Marianne and I used to sit and watch old movies, through the kitchen where she hummed while she cooked, down the hall, passing the framed photo of the 3 of us, me, Marianne, and Claire, taken when Claire was 10, all of us smiling at the beach. I had raised these walls, I had laid these floors. This house was Marianne and me. Our hands, our sweat, our dreams. Cameron had told me I had to leave. I went back to the bedroom and sat on Marianne's side of the bed, like I always did when I needed to think. "This house is you, Mary," I whispered into the dark. "It's you and me." And Cameron said I had to get out of my own house, the one we built. I closed my eyes. I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it on principle. For the right to live in my own home, for my dignity. I imagined her voice, the way I always did. Firm, kind, strong. "You've never backed down from what is right, Ted. Don't start now." Thursday morning, May 2. I woke up at 5:30. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling. Then I got up and took a shower. I dressed carefully. A crisp white button-down shirt, dark dress pants, the same sport coat I had worn to Marianne's funeral. It still fit well. At 6, someone knocked on the back door. I opened it to find Bernie standing there with a paper bag. "Martha made some pastries," he said, handing me the bag. "We figured you'd need something in your stomach." I took the bag. "Thank you." Bernie looked at me seriously. "Are you ready?" "No," I told him, "but I'm going anyway." Bernie smiled. "That's courage, Ted. Courage isn't having no fear. It's doing it anyway." I ate a piece of Martha's pastry standing at the kitchen counter. Then I grabbed my keys, my wallet, the folder Rachel had given me with all the documents, and went out to my truck. Bernie was still standing in his driveway. He raised a hand. I raised mine. I pulled onto Pine Ridge Road and headed for Charlotte. The drive took about 2 hours. The highway winds down the mountains, passing through forests, rivers, and small logging towns. I turned off the radio. I needed silence. I thought about Marianne, about the day we had stood on that empty lot in 1988, nothing but dirt and weeds. And she had said, "This is it, Ted. This is where we're going to build our life." I thought about Claire, about holding her in my arms the day she was born, about teaching her to ride a bike, about the way she used to fall asleep on my shoulder when she was a little girl. I thought about Cameron, the way he had looked at me in the kitchen and said, "You're pathetic." And I thought about what I had built. Not just the house, but a life, a foundation, something solid, something that should have held. Marianne used to say, "If the foundation is strong, the structure stands." I had built a strong foundation. But Cameron had spent 8 years chipping away at the stone, and now we were going to find out if it could still hold. I arrived in Charlotte at 9:30. I parked in the lot across from the regional state lottery headquarters and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, trying to calm my breathing. Then I saw Rachel's car pull in. She parked next to me, got out, and walked over. She tapped on my window. I rolled it down. "Ready?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be." She smiled. "Then let's go get your house back." The building was glass and concrete, looking nothing like justice. Rachel and I walked in at 9:45. We went through the main doors into a lobby with polished floors and fluorescent lights. A security guard checked our IDs, ran us through a metal detector, and pointed us to the elevators. "7th floor," Rachel said quietly. We rode up in silence. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. I had spent the last 2 weeks preparing for this, reviewing documents with Rachel, rehearsing answers, going over the timeline again and again. I knew the facts. I knew the truth. The elevator doors opened. The waiting area on the 7th floor was small and sterile. Grey carpet, a few chairs, a water cooler in the corner, and across the room, sitting in those chairs, were Cameron, Claire, and their lawyer. Cameron was wearing a new, expensive, custom-tailored navy suit with a crisp white shirt. He was sitting with one leg crossed over the other, his arm draped over the back of the empty chair next to him, the posture of a man who believed he had already won. Claire was sitting 2 chairs away from him, her hands clasped in her lap, staring at her phone. She looked pale, exhausted. Standing near them was Attorney Montgomery, 54 years old, slicked back grey hair, expensive watch, a leather briefcase open on the chair next to him as he reviewed his notes. The elevator dinged. All three looked up. Cameron didn't stand. He just looked at me with an unreadable expression and stayed exactly where he was. A power move. A statement. Claire looked at me for a split second, then dropped her gaze back to her phone. That hurt more than anything Cameron had ever done. Rachel's hand touched my elbow. "This way, Mr. Mason." We walked to the opposite side of the waiting area and sat down. 10 feet separated us from Cameron and his lawyer. It felt like miles. At 9:55, the boardroom door opened. A young woman with an agency badge stepped out. "We are ready for you." Cameron stood up first. He walked into the room as if he were claiming territory. Claire followed silently, her head down. Attorney Montgomery nodded professionally at Rachel, gathered his briefcase, and walked in. Rachel and I entered last. The boardroom was long and narrow, with a table in the center and chairs on both sides. The windows looked out over the street. A whiteboard hung on one wall. Bottles of water and a box of tissues sat in the middle of the table. At the head of the table sat a man in his 60s, gray-haired, wearing reading glasses, with a calm, measured expression. He stood up when we entered. "Good morning," he said. "I am Horace Pierce, the mediator assigned to this case. Please, take a seat." Cameron, Claire, and Montgomery took seats on the right side of the table. Rachel and I sat on the left. We were face to face, with Horace at the head between us. I was hyper-aware of every movement. Claire sat 2 chairs away from Cameron, still not looking at me. Cameron leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers, watching. Horace adjusted his glasses and opened a file. "Let me explain the process. This is an informal mediation to resolve a dispute over the ownership of ticket number 47188823C, purchased on the 3rd of April 2024. My role is to facilitate dialogue and help the parties reach a resolution. I do not have the authority to force an outcome, but my findings will be reported to the Commission and carry significant weight. Everything said here is confidential, unless both parties agree otherwise." He looked at each of us. "Does everyone understand?" We all nodded. "Good." Horace set down his pen and clasped his hands. "Let us begin. Attorney Montgomery, your client filed the claim first. You may give your opening statement." Attorney Montgomery stood up, buttoned his suit jacket, cleared his throat, and looked directly at Horace. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce. I represent Mr. Cameron White and Mrs. Claire Mason in this matter." He gestured to Cameron and Claire. Claire didn't look up. "The facts here are very simple," Montgomery continued. "On April 3, Mr. Theodore Mason purchased 2 lottery tickets at a convenience store in Blowing Rock. He brought one of those tickets home and handed it to his daughter, Claire, as a gift. Not a loan, not a conditional transfer, a gift. There were no strings attached, no expectations of return. Under civil law, that is the legal definition of a gift." Montgomery paused, letting the words settle. 3 weeks later, that ticket won $95 million. Mrs. Mason checked the numbers, confirmed the win, and informed her family. At no point during those 3 weeks did Mr. Mason express the slightest interest in the ticket he had gifted away, not until he discovered its value. Montgomery's voice was smooth, confident. The law recognizes the informal gifting of personal property. A lottery ticket is personal property. When Mr. Mason handed that ticket to his daughter and said, "Here, this one's for you," he transferred ownership. The fact that he now regrets his generosity, the fact that he wishes he had kept it for himself, does not void the gift. He looked at Horace. "We ask the Commission to recognize Mrs. Claire Mason as the rightful owner of that ticket and allow her to claim the prize." Montgomery sat down. Cameron gave a small nod of satisfaction. Claire kept staring at the table, her hands clenched in her lap. Horace took a note, then looked across the table to Rachel. "Attorney Vance, your opening statement." Rachel stood up, and I knew this was the moment everything would be decided. I had practiced this story with Rachel dozens of times. But sitting across from Claire, every rehearsed word vanished. I could only tell the truth. Rachel stood with a calm, commanding posture. "Attorney Montgomery has described a fraction of the truth," she began. "What he has omitted are the facts that matter most." She reached into her briefcase and placed 2 documents on the table in front of Horace Pierce. "This," Rachel said, tapping the first sheet, "is the receipt from the Highway Convenience Store in Blowing Rock. Date, the 3rd of April 2024. Time, 2:17 p.m. 2 tickets paid for with a debit card in the name of Theodore Mason." She slid the second document forward. "This is Mr. Mason's bank statement showing the charge at the convenience store on the exact same date and time." Horace leaned forward, examining both pages through his glasses. Rachel continued, her voice firm. "Mr. Mason purchased both tickets. He paid for both tickets. Legally, he is the owner of both tickets." Attorney Montgomery shifted in his chair. Cameron's jaw tightened. "Mr. Mason did hand 1 ticket to his daughter informally," Rachel went on. "A piece of paper worth a few dollars. At the time, it held no more value than a greeting card. But a lottery ticket worth $95 million is not a casual gift. It is a substantial asset, and lottery commission regulations require clear documentation in cases of disputed ownership. Mr. Mason has that documentation. Mr. White does not." Horace looked at me. "Mr. Mason, can you confirm that you purchased these tickets on April 3? "Yes, sir," I said. My voice sounded lower than I expected, but it was steady. "And you bought 2 tickets in a single transaction?" "Yes, 2 tickets." "Why 2? I looked at Rachel. She gave a slight nod. "Because my friend Bernie dared me to buy one," I said. "I figured if I was already buying one, I might as well buy 2. It was only a couple of bucks. I didn't expect to win. I just did it." Horace took a note. "And you gave 1 ticket to your daughter?" "Yes." "Why?" I looked at Claire. She was staring at the table, her hands clenched in her lap. "Because she is my daughter," I said. It was a gesture, just a little ticket. I wanted to share it with her. Horace's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Mason, why did you file a dispute with the lottery?" I took a breath. "Because 3 days after my daughter's ticket won, her husband told me I had to leave. He told me that the house I built 36 years ago with my own bare hands, with my late wife, was no longer my home. He said the $95 million wasn't mine, and he tried to take everything from me." Montgomery leaned forward. "Mr. Mason, you are 72 years old. How clearly do you remember the events of April 3? Rachel's hand touched my arm gently, a cue to stay calm. "I remember it perfectly," I said. "I drove to the convenience store with Bernie Sullivan. The owner, Dave, sold me the tickets. I paid with my debit card. I have the receipt. I remember everything." Montgomery leaned back, looking sour. Rachel reached into her briefcase again. This time, she pulled out a thicker envelope. "There is one more thing," she said, and her tone turned sharp. "On April 8, Mr. White submitted a power of attorney form to First National Bank, claiming authority over Mr. Mason's accounts. She placed an official letter on the table. This is correspondence from the bank dated April 24. The bank rejected the document because the signature did not match the one they have on file for Mr. Mason. They flagged it as potential fraud." Horace's eyebrows shot up. He reached for the letter. Rachel wasn't done. She placed a second document next to it. "This is a police report filed by Mr. Mason at the local precinct on April 9, case number 2024, BR 04751. The report documents an attempt to commit financial fraud via forgery." The room fell dead silent. Horace looked at Cameron. "Mr. White, do you have a response to this?" Cameron's face had gone pale. That was a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Rachel interrupted, her voice hard. "You forged a legal document in my client's name to seize control of his bank accounts. That is not a misunderstanding. That is fraud, and it suggests a pattern of behavior, using manipulation, coercion, and now forgery to steal my client's assets." Horace took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Attorney Montgomery, were you aware of this? Montgomery looked genuinely disturbed. No, I was not. Horace put his glasses back on and locked eyes with Cameron. Mr. White, forging a power of attorney is a serious felony. If this matter proceeds beyond today, you could face criminal charges. Cameron opened his mouth, but Montgomery grabbed his arm. We need a moment, Montgomery said quickly, and practically dragged Cameron out of the room. The door clicked shut behind them. I sat there, hands clasped on the table, my heart racing. Across from me, Claire finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the bank letter, the police report, the evidence of what her husband had done, and for the first time in 8 years, I saw my daughter cry. When we returned from the recess, Claire was still sitting there, clutching tissues in her hands. It was 12:45. Her eyes were red and swollen. Cameron sat next to her, jaw tight, arms crossed. Attorney Montgomery was nowhere to be found. He had stepped out to make a call. Horace Pierce cleared his throat. Mrs. Mason, he said softly, I would like to hear from you. What happened when your father gave you that ticket? Claire's voice was barely audible. I don't know what to say. Horace's tone remained gentle. Take your time. Do you remember it? Yes. Did he say anything to you? Claire swallowed hard. Dad said he bought a lottery ticket and that it was silly. He was smiling. It was the first time I'd seen him smile in months. It put a lump in my throat. Horace nodded. Did he say the prize money would be yours? No, Claire said quietly. He just handed it to me. I said, Thanks, Dad. That was it. Horace took a note. When the ticket won, what happened? Claire's voice cracked. Cameron checked the numbers. He got really excited. He said we were rich. He started making phone calls immediately. And your father? Dad just stood there, Claire whispered. He looked lost. Cameron shifted in his seat. Horace shot him a glaring look, then turned back to Claire. Mrs. Mason, answer me directly. Answer honestly. Do not look at anyone else. Did your father ever mistreat you in those 8 years? Did he ever make you feel unwelcome? Did he ever try to hurt or manipulate you? There was a long silence. Then Claire's tears started falling again. No. Horace leaned forward. No? Claire shook her head. Dad never. He never did anything but treat us with kindness. Cameron opened his mouth. Claire, but Claire's voice rose, louder than I'd heard it in years. Dad never said he didn't want us there. He never complained. Not once. She turned to Horace, and the words started pouring out faster. Cameron told me Dad resented us. Cameron said Dad was only letting us stay out of obligation. Cameron told me Dad talked badly about us behind our backs to the neighbors. Her voice broke. But Dad never said those things. Cameron said Dad said them, and I believed him. I believed Cameron instead of my own father. Cameron's face went white. That's not. Claire turned on him with absolute fury. You told me Dad wanted us out. You said he was just too polite to say it, that you were trying to protect me. Protect me from what? Claire screamed. From my father who loved me, who took us in when we had nothing. The room felt electric. I wiped my eyes, looking at my daughter. Claire turned back to Horace, her voice shaking. My father never wanted us to leave. Cameron did. Cameron wanted to kick him out, and I let him. Cameron shot up from his chair. This is ridiculous. Claire, we're leaving. Mr. White, Horace said sharply. Sit down. We don't have to. I am not leaving with you, Claire said with a firm voice. Now Cameron froze. What? I'm not leaving with you. Not anymore. Cameron's face turned bright red. Claire, think about what you're... I've been thinking about it for weeks. It's over. In that moment, the door opened, and Attorney Montgomery walked in. He looked around the room, taking in Claire's tear-streaked face, Cameron's rage, and Horace's stern expression. He set his briefcase on the table. Mr. Pierce, I need to withdraw from this case. Effective immediately. Cameron's head snapped toward him. You can't do that. I can, and I will, Montgomery said bluntly. Given the evidence of fraud and this testimony, ethically I cannot continue. He turned to Horace. I apologize for the interruption. Then he picked up his briefcase, looked at Cameron, and said, Good luck, Mr. White. You're going to need it. And he walked out. The door clicked shut behind him. Silence. Horace looked at Cameron. Mr. White, do you wish to proceed without counsel? Cameron just stood there, furious, breathing heavily. This is garbage. That old man is manipulating her. Sit down, Horace said with a voice of steel. Or leave. Cameron looked at Claire. Claire, we are leaving right now. Claire didn't move. Claire. She spoke in a quiet voice. No. Cameron stared at her, his face twisted in rage. Then he turned to me, eyes full of venom. This isn't over, he said and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The room fell silent again. Horace exhaled slowly. Mrs. Mason, are you all right? Claire shook her head. No, but I will be. Horace looked at me, then at Rachel. I am concluding this mediation here. I will issue my ruling in 5 business days, but I think we all know where this is going. He turned to me. Mr. Mason, based on the evidence, the purchase receipt, the lack of transfer documentation, the fraud, and Mrs. Mason's testimony, I will recommend that the Commission recognize your ownership of the disputed ticket. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. Horace stood up. This meeting is adjourned. The room began to empty. Horace gathered his files and left. Rachel stepped out into the hallway to make a call, and then it was just the two of us, Claire and me, sitting across from each other. Neither of us spoke. Finally, Claire stood up, walked slowly around the table, her hands shaking, stopped in front of me, and said, Dad, I'm so sorry. Claire and I stayed in that boardroom, and it felt like an hour, but it was probably only 3 minutes. She cried. I cried. She told me she was sorry over and over. I told her I knew. Rachel knocked softly on the door. We need to go. Claire drove her own car. I drove mine. I didn't know if I would ever see her again. I left Charlotte at 2. I took the highway back up the mountain. 2 hours. The afternoon sun was bright, hurting my eyes. I thought about Claire's face, Cameron's rage, Horace's words. I turned the radio off. I needed silence. Song off. Halfway home, my phone rang through the truck's speakers. Bernie, how did it go? He asked. I swallowed hard. I think I won. And Claire? My voice cracked. She asked for my forgiveness. She broke down. She told the truth. There was a pause. Then Bernie said softly, That's good, Ted. I got home at 5. Cameron's SUV was in the driveway. Claire's car was parked on the side. I stayed in the truck for a moment, catching my breath. Then I went inside. Cameron was upstairs in the bedroom. I could hear him moving around behind a closed door. Claire was in the kitchen. Her back was to me, standing at the sink. I stopped in the doorway. Claire froze. Her shoulders tensed. I can't, she said, her voice barely audible. Not yet. I'm sorry. And then she walked past me, head down, and went upstairs. I stood there, alone in the kitchen, listening to the sound of footsteps upstairs. Then I heard voices, Cameron's, high and angry, Claire's, lower, breaking into sobs. I thought about going up. I thought about knocking on the door and demanding to speak to my daughter. But I didn't. It wasn't my place anymore. The next morning, Friday, Cameron left the house at 8 a.m. He didn't come back until past 10 p.m. I assumed he was meeting with a new lawyer or planning something. I didn't ask. That afternoon, I was in the workshop sanding the legs of an end table I'd been working on when I saw a piece of paper slide under the door. I put the sandpaper down and picked it up. It was folded in half. The handwriting was Claire's. Asterisk. Dad, I am so sorry. I don't know how to look you in the face. I don't know how to fix what I did. I am scared, but I need you to know that I love you. I always have. Claire. Asterisk. I sat on the workbench, held that note in my hands, and cried. Saturday and Sunday passed slowly. The house felt like a minefield. Cameron avoided me entirely. Once we crossed paths in the hallway, he looked at me with pure hatred, but didn't say a word. I saw Claire twice. The first was in the upstairs hallway. She stopped when she saw me. We looked at each other for a long moment. Then she whispered, "Hi, Dad," and walked past quickly. The second time, I looked out the window and saw her sitting in her car in the driveway, face in her hands, crying. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to help her, but I didn't know how. Bernie came to see me on Saturday afternoon. He brought a slice of banana bread Martha had made. "How are you holding up?" he asked. I shrugged. "I've lived with them for 8 years, and now I don't know how to talk to them." Bernie nodded. "Cameron's done for. But Claire, give her time, Ted." On Sunday, I did something I hadn't done since Marianne's funeral. I went to church. The parish looked exactly as I remembered. The same wooden pews, the same stained glass, the same smell of polished wood and incense. Mrs. Josephine saw me as I was walking out after service. She approached with a warm face. "I heard the mediation went well," she said. "I think so," I replied. "I'll know for sure this week." "And Claire?" I looked down. "She's having a hard time." Joe put a hand on my arm. "She'll pull through. She knows the truth now. That's the hardest part." I went back home and spent the rest of the day in the workshop carving a small wooden cross. I didn't know who it was for. Maybe Marianne. Maybe me. Monday morning I woke up at 5. I hadn't slept much. I made coffee, ate some toast, sat at the kitchen table, and waited. The phone didn't ring. Tuesday, Wednesday, still nothing. Thursday morning, May 9. Woke up at 5 again. Showered, dressed, made more coffee, stared at the phone. At 10:15, Rachel called. I answered on the second ring. "Hello, Ted." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the smile in it. "We won." I slumped heavily into the kitchen chair. "Rachel?" "Horace issued his ruling this morning. The commission accepted his recommendation. The decision is in your favor. Cameron's claim was rejected. You are recognized as the legal owner of both tickets." I couldn't speak. "Both tickets," I finally managed to say. "Both." There was no transfer documentation, no contract, no signed agreement, nothing. "Ted, you are getting the 95 million. I sat there, completely numb, staring at the wall. 95 million. Both tickets. I had won, Rachel explained. "You can present the winning ticket to begin the official claiming process. It will take 11 days for verification, and then you'll receive the $95 million. I held the phone to my ear, trying to make sense of the number. Rachel continued. "You also need to serve the formal eviction notices. The law requires a 60-day notice." 60 days, I repeated. "I'll draft them today. You serve them whenever you are ready." That afternoon, Rachel emailed me the notices. I printed 2 copies, one for Cameron, one for Claire, and left them on my desk. I stared at them for an hour. Bernie called. "Did you give them to them yet?" "Not yet." "What are you waiting for?" "I don't know." On Tuesday, May 14, I did it. I couldn't face them directly. I just couldn't. So I left the 2 envelopes on the kitchen table, each name written on the front, and drove to Bernie's house. I came back 2 hours later. Cameron's SUV was gone. The envelopes were gone, and there was a hole in the living room drywall. Cameron had punched it. The framed portrait of Marianne, the one that used to be on the mantel, had been knocked to the floor. The glass was shattered. I picked it up with shaking hands. Bernie had been right to tell me to get out of the house. Upstairs, the bedroom door was closed. I knocked. "Claire?" Her voice sounded muffled. "Come in, Dad." I opened the door. Claire was sitting on the bed with an open suitcase next to her, clothes folded in neat piles. He left, she said. He said he's staying at a motel. He said a lot of things I don't want to repeat. Are you okay? No, but he didn't hurt me. She looked at me. 60 days. The law requires it. I'm so sorry, Claire. She shook her head. Don't apologize. You have every right. She paused. I'll be out in 2 weeks. Cameron is coming for his things tomorrow. I just need a few days to figure out where I'm going. You can stay the 60 days if you need to, I told her. Claire shook her head. I can't stay here. Not after what I did. I wanted to tell her so many things, but I couldn't find the words. Okay, I said. The next day, Wednesday the 15th, Rachel and I drove to Charlotte to the lottery headquarters. The process was formal. Identity verification, surrendering the ticket, paperwork in triplicate. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses, looked up and smiled. Congratulations, Mr. Mason. Your claim will be processed within the next 11 business days. We will be in touch regarding the final deposit. She handed me a receipt. Official claim code. 9.5 million. Life-changing money. But it didn't feel real. Rachel asked me in the parking lot, "How do you feel?" "Empty," I said. "That feeling will pass. Give it time." She paused. "I'm going to introduce you to Caroline Foster, a financial advisor I trust. You're going to need accounts, investments, estate planning." I felt overwhelmed, one step at a time. As I drove home, I thought about what Marianne would say. Asterisk. Don't let the money change who you are. Asterisk. I won't, Mary, I whispered. I promise. The following morning, Thursday the 16th, a moving truck backed into the driveway at 10 a.m. Cameron had hired it. I stayed in the workshop and watched through the window. Cameron was directing the movers aggressively, barking orders, throwing his hands around in anger. They carried out furniture, boxes, the TV, the armchair, the kitchen table. By afternoon, the truck was full. Cameron walked up to the workshop door. He didn't knock. He just stood there and said through the glass, "You think you won, but you didn't. You lost your daughter. You're going to die alone in this house with your money. That's what you deserve." Then he turned around and walked away. The truck pulled out of the property. Cameron's car followed. He was gone. I stood in the doorway of the workshop, and the house felt quieter. A strange relief washed over me completely. Over the next few days, Claire was still there, packing slowly. We crossed paths in the hallway. Awkward good mornings, stiff good nights. There wasn't much conversation, but we were polite. 3 nights after Cameron left, I was making dinner. Pasta, nothing fancy. Claire came downstairs. "Smells good, Dad." "There's plenty," I said. "If you want." She hesitated. "Yeah, thanks." We ate at the kitchen counter. It was quiet, but it wasn't hostile. "Dad?" "Yeah, I'm filing for divorce. I called a lawyer today. Sounds like a good idea." She looked at her plate. "I'm going to rent an apartment. Start over. Maybe look for a job. I haven't worked in 8 years. You'll pull through," I told her. "You're strong." "I don't feel strong." "Being strong isn't a feeling," I told her. "It's a choice." Claire smiled just a little. "You sound exactly like Grandpa. He used to say that. He was a wise man." 3 days later, I went to the hardware store to buy some sandpaper. When I got back, Claire's car was gone. Her room was empty, clean. The bed was made, the floor vacuumed. On the kitchen counter was an envelope with my name on it. I opened it with shaking hands. The letter was 2 handwritten pages in Claire's careful script. It started with, "Dear Dad," and ended with, "I love you." In between was everything she couldn't say to my face. I sat at the kitchen table and opened the envelope. 2 pages, front and back, filled with her handwriting. The ink was smudged in a few places. She had been crying when she wrote it. Asterisk. "Dear Dad, I am writing this because I don't have the courage to say it to your face. Forgive me. Those words will never be enough. but they are all I have. Forgive me for the last 8 years. For letting Cameron treat you like you didn't matter. For staying quiet when he told you to get out of your house, the house you built, the house where Mom lived. For believing his lies instead of what I knew in my heart. For 8 years, Cameron told me you resented us, that you were too polite to say it, but you wanted us gone, that you badmouthed us to the neighbors, that you were getting old, bitter, difficult. I believed him. I am so ashamed. The truth is, it was easier to believe Cameron than to face my own guilt. I knew we were taking advantage of you. I knew Cameron was using you, and if I admitted it, I would have had to do something about it. I was too weak, too cowardly, too dependent. I lost myself in this marriage, Dad. I became someone I don't recognize, someone who could betray her own father for a man who never loved her. I realize now Cameron didn't marry me because he loved me. He saw an opportunity, a house to take, money to eventually have. I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't expect you to want me in your life, but I need you to know that I love you. I never stopped, even when I couldn't show it, even when I chose him over you. I am filing for divorce. I am renting my own apartment. I am going to figure out who I am outside of this mess. I will understand if you don't want to see me, but if there is any chance, I will come back in 3 days. I will knock on the door, and I will understand if you don't answer. I love you, Dad. Forgive me. Claire, asterisk. I finished reading, set the letter on the table, and covered my face with my hands. I cried for the 8 years we had lost, for Claire's pain, because Marianne wasn't here to help us. But I also cried out of hope. She said she would come back. 3 days. I spent those 3 days cleaning. I vacuumed the living room. I dusted Marianne's portrait. The glass was already repaired. I scrubbed the kitchen. I even cleaned the guest room, though I didn't know what for. Bernie stopped by on the 2nd day. He found me polishing the countertops. You're going to rub a hole right through that granite, he said. I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, then folded it carefully and handed it back. She's coming home, Ted. This isn't her home anymore. Home isn't a place, Bernie said. It's people. On the 3rd day, I was a bundle of nerves. I woke up at 5 and couldn't go back to sleep. I made coffee, paced back and forth, looked out the window. By noon, I had convinced myself she wasn't coming. At 4, a car pulled in. It was Claire's. My heart hammered in my chest. I froze, listening to her footsteps on the porch. She knocked on the door. I forced myself to move. I walked over, took a breath, and opened it. Claire was standing there in jeans and a sweater, her eyes red and puffy. She had been crying on the drive over. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. "Hi, sweetie." We stood there, neither of us knowing what to do. "Come in," I said. She sat on the sofa. I took my armchair. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "Did you read it?" she asked. 3 times. "Did you mean every word?" I did. Silence. I leaned forward. "Claire, I need you to understand something." She looked at me with fear and hope in her eyes. "I forgive you," I said. Her breath hitched. "I really do," I continued. "But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was. I can't forget the last 8 years. We have to start over, not as father and daughter living under the same roof, but as 2 people who love each other and are trying to learn how to trust each other again." Her eyes filled with tears. "I want that. It isn't going to be easy. I know it's going to take time and honesty. I'm willing, Dad. I promise." I studied her face. I saw Marianne in her, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her mouth, but I also saw someone lost, trying to find her way back. "Then I'm willing to try too." Claire broke down, covered her face, and let out deep, shaking sobs. I crossed the room and sat next to her. She leaned into me, burying her face in my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around her back. For the first time in 8 years, I hugged my daughter. She cried. I cried. We stayed like that for a long time. Eventually, Claire pulled away and wiped her eyes. "I'm a mess," You're entitled to be. She let out a watery chuckle. Can we try something? What? Weekly dinners. On Sundays, like Mom used to do. The words hit me hard. Marianne's Sunday dinners. Pot roast and potatoes. The four of us around the table when things were good. I would like that very much, I told her. Claire nodded. And I want to pay you back for the rent, the utilities, everything. I need to take responsibility. I wanted to argue, but I understood. This was part of how she was going to heal. Now right, we'll figure out her nanage. 9. Thank you. We talked for another hour. She told me about her apartment, a small one-bedroom downtown. She was looking for a job, putting together her resume after 8 years. The divorce was moving forward, though Cameron was fighting it. She had started going to therapy twice a week. I have a lot to work on, she said. That takes courage. I don't feel brave. Courage isn't a feeling, I reminded her. It's a choice. She smiled, a real smile. You sound like Grandpa. He was a wise man. Eventually, she looked at the clock. I should go. I walked her to the door. Dad? Yes, I love you. I love you too, my little Claire Bear. She stopped. You haven't called me that since I was a kid. You'll always be my little Claire Bear. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. She hugged me tight. Thank you. Then she left. I stood on the porch and watched the red taillights of her car disappear. Then I went inside and leaned against the door. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. That evening, I sat on the back porch and watched the sunset. The sky was painted orange, pink, and purple over the Blue Ridge Mountains. I thought about everything. The lottery, the betrayal, the fight, the victory, and now this. The beginning of something I thought was lost. Asterisk. I'm proud of you, Ted. Marianne's voice said in my head. I hope so, Mary, I whispered. My cell phone buzzed. A text from Claire. Asterisk. Thank you for giving me a second chance. See you Sunday. I love you. Asterisk. I smiled and replied. Asterisk. I love you too. Sunday at 5. I'll make pot roast. Asterisk. Asterisk. Perfect. That night, I slept in my own bed, in my own house. Claire's letter sat on my nightstand. Sunday dinner was planned. When I woke up the next morning, the sunlight was streaming through Marianne's curtains, the ones she had sewn by hand 30 years ago. I lay there watching the light, and I realized something. I had won more than the lottery. I had won my life back. The money hit my account on Tuesday, June 18. $95 million. I stared at the number for 20 minutes. Then I called Bernie. It's real, I told him. What are you going to do with it? Whatever I want. I fought for it. The next day I met with Caroline Foster, the financial advisor Rachel had recommended. Her office was in Charlotte, leather chairs and a view of the city. Caroline was 56, gray-haired and direct. Ted, what do you want your money to do? I want security. I want to help my daughter, and I want to honor my wife. We spent 2 hours planning. Caroline recommended diversifying. Index funds, bonds, real estate, trusts. This will give you a massive passive income every year while preserving your capital. Every year you can live comfortably and fund charitable causes. Suddenly, an idea sparked in my head. What if I wanted to help elderly folks whose families are trying to take advantage of them? People who are getting kicked out of their homes, who need lawyers but can't afford them. Caroline smiled. A legal defense fund. With a good chunk of this money, you could fund it in perpetuity. I thought of Marianne, who had always stood up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. I want to do that. I called Rachel. I want to create the Mason Foundation for Elder Protection. I want to set aside a good portion of the prize to help seniors who are victims of financial abuse. I want you as the legal director and Laura Henderson as a consultant. Rachel's voice caught in her throat. Ted, that's incredible. In July, we made it official. Rachel opened an office in Charlotte. Laura joined 3 days a week. By September, we took our first case. An 82-year-old woman whose son had forged a power of attorney to take her house. Rachel won it in 6 weeks. The woman called me crying, "You saved my life." "No, ma'am. You saved yourself. We just gave you the tools." By the end of the year, the foundation had helped 47 people. Marianne would have loved it, but I needed something else. In August, I put the house on Pine Ridge Road up for sale. Bernie came to see me. "Are you sure? You built this with Marianne. Every board, every nail, but Cameron and Claire left a stain. I can't wash out. I need a fresh start. Where will you go?" "To the coast. Folly Beach, South Carolina. Sea air, an endless horizon, a place where I can breathe." The house sold in 3 weeks. A young family with 2 kids. I took very little with me. Marianne's portrait, my tools, a couple of pieces of furniture. In late August, I bought a house on Folly Beach, modern, wood and glass, looking out over the Atlantic. It had a workshop with large windows where I could hear the waves. It wasn't the house Marianne and I had built, but it was mine. The first morning, I walked out to the beach. The sun rose over the water, painting the sky orange and gold. The air smelled of salt and freedom. Bernie and Martha visited me often. We'd walk on the beach, drink coffee on the deck. "You look lighter," Martha told me one day. She was right. It was as if I'd been carrying a heavy weight for 8 years and had finally dropped it. Claire drove down from Charlotte every other Sunday. It was a long drive, but she never missed it. We'd cook pot roast, just the way Marianne liked it. We'd sit on the deck, watch the sunset, and talk. In September, her divorce was finalized. "How do you feel?" I asked her. "Free. Scared, but free." In October, she got a job at a community center. The pay wasn't much. "It's nothing fancy," she told me, "but I earned it. I hadn't earned anything in 8 years. I'm proud of you. I really am." In December, I helped her move into her apartment. Small, clean, hers. It isn't much. It's perfect. Christmas was quiet, just the 2 of us at the beach house. Claire brought some slightly burned cookies. I made a baked ham. We exchanged gifts. I gave her a photo album Marianne had put together. Claire gave me a framed photo of Marianne and me from the 90s. I found it in the boxes I had in storage. "I thought you should have it," I cried. Christmas together, just the 2 of us. It was enough. Spring arrived. April 2025. A year since the mediation. One morning I was out in the yard planting azaleas, Marianne's favorites. I was 73, but still going strong. A car pulled in. Claire, holding gardening gloves. "Morning, Dad. I thought you could use a little help." "You don't have to." "I want to." We knelt side by side, planting flowers right where Marianne's garden would have been. "Dad?" "Yeah. Thank you for not giving up on me." "I could never give up on you. Cameron did." "I am not Cameron." "No, you aren't." We finished, stood up, and brushed the dirt off our knees. "When are they going to bloom?" "Late spring, hopefully. Mom would love this." "Yeah, she would." We sat on the steps of the deck. The morning sun warmed the ocean stretching out in front of us. I looked around at the house I had bought, my daughter beside me, the garden we were planting, the life I had fought to get back. "I used to think a house was just walls and a roof," I said. "Wood and nails. Things I could measure." Claire listened. "But it isn't. A house is the memories, the people who filled it. Your mother's laugh, your first steps, the fights, the forgiveness, the love. That's why you fought so hard." "I fought because letting Cameron keep it would mean admitting that none of it mattered, that 36 years with your mother could be erased by greed. I didn't fight for money. I fought for what all of this meant." Claire rested her head on my shoulder. "You won, Dad. We both won." I sat there, the Atlantic stretching to the horizon. The lottery ticket, the betrayal, the battle, the victory, the foundation helping dozens of people. Claire, free and healing. Marianne's memory, honored. I was happy. It wasn't a perfect life. It wasn't without its scars. But I was happy. For the first time since Marianne passed away, I was truly happy. People say family is everything, and I believe that. But family isn't just the people who share your roof or your blood. Family is the people who see you, who stand by you, who tell you the truth even when it hurts. Cameron and Claire lived in my house for 8 years, but Bernie, Martha, Mrs. Josephine, Rachel, they were my family when it counted, and Claire found her way back. If you are facing betrayal, if you feel like you are losing, if you are afraid, know this: you have the right to protect what is yours. Your home, your dignity, your peace. Love doesn't mean letting people take everything from you. Fight for what matters, fight with honor. And when it's over, leave the door open for forgiveness, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve it. I am 73 years old. I have more money than I can spend, but the richest things I have are Sunday dinners with my daughter, working in the garden, and knowing that I stood my ground when it mattered most. That is worth more than 95 million. It's worth everything. What would you do if you were in my position? Leave a comment. Tell me your story. Thank you for listening to mine. I am Theodore Mason, from the beaches of Folly Beach, South Carolina. Take good care of each other. Looking back at this family story, I see a man who almost lost it all, not because he was weak, but because he loved too much and trusted blindly. Don't be like I was. Don't ignore the warning signs. Don't let 8 years go by while someone slowly strips away your home, your dignity, your peace. My advice: set boundaries from the beginning. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you. A father's vengeance isn't about cruelty. It's about defending what is right when everyone expects you to surrender. I didn't fight for money. I fought for meaning, for Marianne's memory, for the house we built, for my own soul. This story taught me that betrayal cuts deepest when it comes from those you love, but it also taught me that redemption is possible. Claire found her way back. I found my peace. This father's vengeance turned into justice, then into forgiveness, and then into healing. My personal belief is that God doesn't send us trials to break us, but to reveal who we truly are. When Cameron tried to steal my home, God showed me that I was stronger than I thought. When Claire came back, God reminded me that forgiveness is divine. Not because they deserve it, but because we need it. If you are in a family situation like mine, facing manipulation, greed, betrayal, know this: you are not alone. Fight with honor, protect what is yours, and when the dust settles, leave the door open for those who genuinely seek to make amends. Revenge is not the goal. Peace is. Thank you for walking this journey with me to the end. I'd love to hear your perspective. What would you have done if you were in Theodore's shoes? Please leave a comment, sharing your thoughts. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing so you don't miss the stories to come. A gentle reminder: while inspired by real dynamics regarding financial elder abuse, some elements have been dramatized for narrative purposes. If this content isn't your preference, feel free to explore other videos that better suit you. I am Theodore Mason, from the beaches of Folly Beach, South Carolina.